What's up, guys? You thinking about getting yourself into a little Darkest Dungeon 2 action? Are you at least a little curious? Or maybe you just want some clarification on what you're actually supposed to do in this game? Well, I hope so, because that's pretty much the whole point of this video. If fighting for your life while frantically racing through a hellish, apocalyptic world and trying desperately not to stress everyone the fuck out sounds like fun, this might be your game. Darkest Dungeon 2 is currently in early access on the Epic Game Store, but has recently been given a full release date of February 2023, when it'll also become available on Steam for PC as well as consoles soon after. My name is Parkattack. Let's get going. Alright, so the first thing I'd like to talk about in Darkest Dungeon 2 is like the setting and the story and the overall feel of the game. Whether or not you've played the first Darkest Dungeon, it shouldn't take long to realize that the game is very heavily influenced by the Lovecraftian horror genre. It's a pretty dark setting. People are going crazy. They're all getting stressed out. There's, things are looking grim. You've got all these grotesque and weird cosmic enemies that kind of instill your fear of the unknown. A lot of good stuff there. Now, although Darkest Dungeon 1 and Darkest Dungeon 2 share the same world and universe and some of the same characters, the story doesn't directly carry over, at least not in a linear way. So this means that if you haven't played Darkest Dungeon 1 and you want to jump into Darkest Dungeon 2, you can do that without missing out on too much, or anything that's essential to the plot. Now, if you have played Darkest Dungeon 1, or the original Darkest Dungeon, and you're familiar with the style of gameplay and the feel of the story, you know that it's more of a descent into madness. Darkest Dungeon 2, on the other hand, is more of a Hail Mary or a last-ditch effort to overcome that madness. One of the cool things about Darkest Dungeon 2 is that it focuses a lot more on the actual story of the individual characters, whereas Darkest Dungeon 1 didn't really do that. So that's pretty much it as far as the overall feeling and story of the game goes. So your next question is probably going to be, well, what kind of game is it? What genre? And the answer to that is a little complicated, but basically what we can say is that it's a roguelike. If you're unfamiliar with roguelikes, there are a couple of aspects to a game that makes it a roguelike. One of those is permadeath, another is randomly generated levels, and then there's also kind of a replayability loop. So permadeath means that once your character or your party or whoever you're playing as dies, that's game over. Now you might be thinking, I don't like that. I don't want to start over from scratch. I don't want to lose all my progression. But that's actually kind of the point of roguelikes. It's not that you're losing all of your progress, but it's that you get to restart and replay and try new builds and new combinations so that you can get just as far as you did in the previous run or even further. Now, part of what keeps that fresh is randomly generated levels. If you had to replay the same levels over and over and over again, obviously that would kind of suck. But with randomly generated levels, it ensures that each time it's a new experience, and you'll be receiving new upgrades and powers, as well as new enemies and conflicts to overcome each time you play through the game. Now, if you ask some people if Darkest Dungeon 2 is a roguelike, they might tell you, no, it's not. It's actually a roguelite. And so now you're thinking, okay, what the f*** is a roguelite? I just learned what a roguelike is. Basically, roguelites are kind of an evolution or a new take on the roguelike genre. Most things are almost the same or the exact same or similar, with the main exception being that roguelites have progression that does carry over each time you start a new run. The difference here is really splitting hairs. In my personal opinion, I think they can all be grouped into the roguelike genre. It's kind of like comparing Coke to Pepsi. So from this point on, I'm just going to refer to them as roguelikes rather than dictating between roguelike and roguelite. Okay. So let's talk about the actual progression in Darkest Dungeon 2 and what you can unlock and what carries over and what doesn't carry over between runs. So your kind of main source of carryover progression is through your player level. Each time you complete a run, your honor is calculated and added to your player level, which is basically the equivalent of any other game gaining experience. So the further you got in the run, the more enemies you killed, the more objectives you completed. All of that stuff kind of gives you honor, so then when you finish the run, all that honor gets added up to your player level, and as your player level advances, you unlock things that can make the game easier and things that make the game harder. Things that make the game easier would include things like consumable items, new trinkets, and positive quirks, but on the flip side, you're also unlocking negative quirks and things like more diseases. All of these things that are unlocked through your player level, once unlocked, will become available every run from then on. That doesn't mean that you're going to get these items or quirks or diseases every single time. It just means that they're added to the pool of possible outcomes. In some of the earlier levels, you'll also be unlocking new heroes. The game starts you off with 4 heroes, but then lets you also unlock a few more from advancing your player level. As with the previously mentioned things, obviously once you unlock a hero, they're available to play with each time you start a new run. Each hero comes with 5 combat skills already unlocked, but the rest of them have to be unlocked by visiting hero shrines during a run with that hero. Once you've unlocked a skill by visiting a hero shrine, that skill will always be available for you to choose from there on out. The final thing that you can unlock that carries over between runs are your confessions. There's a total of 5 confessions in the game, which essentially count as acts or chapters. Alright, so now let's talk about things that don't carry over between runs. Any item that you pick up during a run, consumable items, stagecoach items, trinkets, are not carried over to your next run. Now yes, when you advance your player level and unlock these to add them to the pool of possibilities, they'll still be there. But you're not going to start a new game with a character that has the items from your previous run. Another thing that you'll lose when you start a new run is any combat skill upgrades. While you're progressing through your run, you'll gain mastery points, which you can use to upgrade the combat skills of your heroes. Once your game is over and you restart a new game, all of the hero skills go back to the base level. This makes each new run fresh and exciting and an opportunity to start anew and try a new strategy, while at the same time adding depth and progression to the game. Okay, so now let's talk about the gameplay and what each run might look like. The first thing you're going to do is you're going to pick a confession. If you're just starting out, you don't have a choice here. You're just going to pick the first confession and then move on. If you've already unlocked additional confessions, you can choose those, or you can also choose to replay one of your older confessions. After that, you move on a little bit down the road, and now it's time to pick your party. When you start a new run, all of your heroes, no matter who you choose, are going to have neutral relationships with each other. As you progress through your run, decisions you make will influence your heroes' relationships either positively or negatively, making things either a lot easier for you or a lot harder for you. Now, speaking of progressing through the run, we got to talk about the stagecoach. The stagecoach is your transportation in the way that you move through the levels and choose the routes that are randomly generated in each region. As you move through the region and choose your routes, you will have encounters. Some of these include combat, and some of these don't include combat. The combat encounters are pretty straightforward. It's the good guys versus the bad guys, and you just kick their ass and move on. The non-combat encounters are a little more complex and can range anywhere from stealing stuff from unarmed citizens to deciding who gets to have a spa day. As you progress through the run, the enemies will get harder and harder, but your heroes will also be getting stronger and stronger by acquiring better items, trinkets, and by upgrading their combat skills. There are 3 main regions that you're going to progress through, but there's also the valley, which is kind of the introduction or beginning region, and then finally the mountain, where the final boss is at the end. The 3 regions you'll be going in between are randomly generated, but you'll have a choice of 2 or 3 to choose from each time you make it to an inn. Inns are basically your checkpoints or your rest points in between regions. Your heroes get to rest at the inn, they heal up, they can get buffs for the next region, you can upgrade your skills there or add things to your stagecoach, and then you can also choose what your next region is going to be. If you're a sweaty gamer like me and you can make it all the way to the mountain, all you have to do now is make it to the final boss and take him out. Once you do that, you'll unlock some dialogue, a little bit of story, and then you're going to restart from the beginning, just like you would if your party was wiped. However, defeating the final boss grants much more honor, which progresses your player level much more, and it also unlocks new confessions, which progress you through the story even more. So, if all of this sounds interesting to you, give it a shot. If you like strategy games, if you like really thinking, building, theory crafting, you really can't go wrong with a good roguelike. On top of that, in my opinion, it's the best value and best bang for your buck you can get from a single player video game. You can sink hours and hours into roguelikes, and Darkest Dungeon 2 is shaping up to be not only a great roguelike, but one that's accessible for people who are new to the genre. But of course, not every video game is going to appeal to everyone, and that's okay. But if you are even a little interested, make sure you stay tuned, because I'm going to be coming out with a lot more videos on Darkest Dungeon 2. Alright guys, that's gonna do it for this video. Like and subscribe, let me know what you think down in the comments. Thank you for watching. Once again, my name is Park Attack. Peace.